oddly enough, this morning we're talking about shipwreck. We're talking, and that's exactly. I mean, I'm serious. I'm just now getting. It was the most hectic, chaotic. When you knocked on the door, I had a heart attack at the same time. The Lord was going, "Oh no!"
I've been trying to call you. I should come over earlier.
You should. She's gonna have to do a lot better if I'm ever gonna make it in the ministry. She's gonna have to get her act
I'm trying to
together.
be a good mother and not, interfere.
You're being a great mother. You're being a horrible church member, though. You got I'm sure it was an accident. Well, you can't be too careful these days. I want to say also it's great to have our buddy Aaron. Aaron and his brothers and sisters gave their hearts to Jesus just back during his Sunday school. Now he's basically grown. I just can't even get over it. We had lunch the other day, and it's just wonderful. It makes me feel like a million years old. But it's wonderful to get to watch somebody who gave their heart to Jesus as a child who's now becoming an adult. We're very proud of you, young man. We are always proud of you. Not good. I'm going to go back here and just catch a quick nap while we worship. But why don't you guys stand and sing together?
Alright, our first hymn this morning is number 570. If you need the notes, I'm anchored in Jesus.
Probably just going to be this. You have to.
I'm waiting on my family to sit down. There's just two people standing there.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Let's get it together. Man, I was up last night. I was reading about all of this that's going on at the southern border. And man, oh man, the temptation for debate and to get political is just so strong. And our church even managed to get themselves involved and issue a statement about not separating children from their mothers. And I think, I think it was hasty at best, but I want to pray as a church that God would help us to have the right voice. Does that make sense? What I'm hearing from other religious leaders is not what the church needs to be. We don't need to be commenting on stuff like this as far as I know. We don't need to issue statements. Of course, we don't want children to be separated from their mothers, but I do want children taken away from drug smugglers and people who are human trafficking. It's just not something I think that we should get involved in on a political level, but I think the church needs to have a voice that says, listen, the problem in this country is not racism. The problem in this country is not political. The problem in this country is the same as it's always been. It's sin. And it's rooted in sin. And the only answer is not to issue statements of what we're against or saying how we feel about Donald Trump. The only answer that the church should have is Jesus Christ and Him alone. We ought to issue a statement that says, listen, we hate what's going on at the border, but we're not waiting on them to come to us. We're going to where they are. Amen. It's not important. That is a very important argument. And I have a very strong opinion about that. But I just hope and pray to God that we as a church would stand up and say, listen, we are deeply troubled by what's going on in our southern border. So do you know that we have Nazarenes in every single town that they came from? We're working to try to make it a better place. That's what I want to be a part of. But I'm telling you, I've never seen something that draws people in that I love dearly, very much so. And we get part of it, and I spend so much time on it myself, just part of this, what's going on in our country right now. It's just so easy to have an argument. It's much harder to say, listen, we've got to get past and see what the root of the problem is. That's what the church is to do. So I want you to bow your heads with me this morning. The trouble with all this is, we all have so much, and the devil places so much on us. We did a wedding last night for a couple, and we were talking about there's no way you can ever possibly know when you're starting out what all the devil's going to try to do to rip you apart, try to weigh down your family. But we know that he's going to do anything he can to try to keep you from these moments right here. We've got big, important things. We're talking about going to other countries and helping people. And so the devil places, they said, he can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. And so I feel like that's kind of where we are in America. If you're not bad, you're too busy to really do anything about it. And this may be just the preacher answer, but over and over and over again, I just kept thinking last night, there's only one thing that I can think of immediately to do, and that's pray. That's not a cop-out. I just feel like sometimes we need to slow down and step back and start to see God again. Our lives are so busy. So would you bow your heads with me and he leaves in the morning, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So I was asking your mom to keep him first, so tell him all that good stuff like that.
Yes. It's exciting. He's going to be gone for 9 days. Is that right? We're so happy for you, young man. We're proud of you, and we're so glad you're part of
Thanks
this.
for out there myself.
Yeah. Please.
And Brooke has been on for our church.
Oh, yeah, I didn't mention it. My cousin Brooke, I know she has a brain tumor. She goes in.
She goes Tuesday to the rural surgeon.
Please remember her. I'm telling you, there's a lot of sickness and sorrow. You know what's strange? I've been to a lot of hospitals in the past 10, 11 years, and it's never been the circumstance that's determined someone's joy when I visit them, ever. I've been to see people who have a flu, and it's the most miserable time of their life, and I've been to see people who are dying of cancer, and they have a smile on their face. And it seems to be Jesus who makes the difference. It's hard to wrap my mind around sometimes that the purpose of life is not to be happy, but it's to get close to the Lord. Because sometimes that means hard times. Would you bow your heads with me and remember Brooke and Jordan as he travels? And if you have any prayer requests, please slip them in the offering plate today. And I'll be sure and get those to the prayer chain. And if there's any of you, I'm sorry. Please say a prayer for your children. Oh, bless you. Yeah, absolutely. Jennifer, please pray for them. Pray for that young couple starting out too. I'm telling you, it has been, I could go on and on about that family last night. But that young man is he's the most fun to be around. He's hilarious. We had the most fun you could ever imagine. And he has muscular dystrophy. He barely can move any of his muscles. He can move his fingers a little bit. And we had the best time. And he was telling me about his clothes. I mean, you just cannot imagine. And I thought, I was telling him a little bit about Johnny Erickson Cotta. And she said, I wasn't sure that I could make it. She had an accident, a diving accident, paralyzed from the neck down. And she said, I just thought my life was over. She said, my wedding day, I was in this big funky wheelchair. And she said, my dress kind of hung over. And she said, I didn't know if I could make it through the wedding, let alone through life. And she said, I came to that back door and I looked at my husband. And she said, I saw the love on his face. And she said, I knew that I could make it. And she said, that kind of reminds me of how Jesus is. So that he loves us even with our disabilities, even with our hurts and our hang-ups. He still loves us. And if we can just focus on him, she said, I know we can make it through anything. So why don't you bow your heads with us this morning? We're going to pray in just a moment. If you'd like to come to the altar, they're always open.
You gonna pray first?
No, go ahead, Gene.
When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, what my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Though Satan should come, though trial should come, but this blessed assurance control, that Christ hath regarded my helpless estate, and has shed his own blood for my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. My sin, all the bliss of this glorious thought. My sin, not in part, but the whole, is led to his cross, and my love is no more. Praise the Lord, oh my soul. It is shall resound, and on earth shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul.
Amen. Amen.
It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul.
Gene, would you sing that last verse one more time?
Hey, before you do, I was going to ask you to do that, but before you do, I want to read something. That'd be okay? And I want you to sing that last verse again. This was written by a man named Horatio G. Spafford. And he says, when peace like a river attendeth my way. Let's sing that one in a minute, Gene, but this is what he writes. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. The author Horatio Stafford was a Presbyterian layman from Chicago, and he established a very successful legal practice as a young businessman and was also a devout Christian. Among his close friends were several evangelists, including the famous Dwight L. Moody, also from Chicago. Spafford's fortune evaporated in the wake of the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Having invested heavily in real estate along Lake Michigan's shoreline, he lost everything overnight. In a saga reminiscent of Job, his son died a short time before his financial disaster. But the worst was yet to come. Hymnologist Keith Osbeck tells the story, desiring a rest for his wife and 4 daughters, as well as wishing to join and assist Moody and his musician Ira Sankey in one of their campaigns in Great Britain. Spafford planned a European trip for his family in 1873. In November of that year, due to unexpected last-minute business developments, he had to remain in Chicago, but sent his wife and 4 daughters on ahead as scheduled on the SS Ville de Havre, and he expected to follow them in just a few days. On November 22nd, the ship was struck by the Lockheed, an English vessel, and sank in 12 minutes. Several days later, the survivors were finally at Cardiff, Wales, and Mrs. Spafford cabled her husband, saved alone. Spafford left immediately to join his wife, and the hymn is said to have been penned as he approached the area of the ocean where he thought the ship carrying his daughters had sunk. Another daughter, Bertha, was born in 1878, as well as a son, Horatio, in 1880, and though he later died of scarlet fever. After the birth of his daughter, Grace, in 1881, Spafford and his wife moved to Jerusalem out of deep interest in the Holy Land, and they established an American colony, a Christian utopian society engaged in philanthropic activities among Jews, Muslims, and Christians. And after decades of benevolent activities, the colony ceased to be a communal society in the 50s, though it continued to gain second life as a hotel. And the first home of the talks between Palestine and Israel eventually led to the 1983 Oslo Peace Accords. On a personal note, this song reaches past all that stuff that the devil tries to use, and it finds that place deep down inside of you that says, this world doesn't control you. You don't have to jump into this chaos and this madness and everybody's spinning out of control and arguing and fighting, and there's something deep down in that says you don't have to be part of that. You don't have to be that. You can have peace. You can have peace that is like a river. You can have joy like a fountain. You can be in the midst of the worst possible circumstance and have the best time of your life because you will be close to the Lord. So my prayer for our country, for you, for my family, is that we would remember what it's like to know the peace of the Lord in our homes and in our lives, because that's what the world needs to see. Stand up in the midst of turmoil and say, God is enough. He's our strength.
Lord, haste the day when my faith shall be sight. The clouds be rolled back as a scroll. The trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul.
Amen.
It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul.
God is always good, man. Praise the Lord. Gene, could you come back tomorrow morning and do that again for me, please? No. That took less time than I thought it would, okay? So you thought about it? Okay.
And read it.
How do I get Gene to sing it, though, is what I'm trying to
You
do.
should take this, you were through.
There you go. No, just go ahead. That's fine.
Our next hymn this morning is number 556, Till the Storm Passes By.
While the soul
providing us with home, food, shelter, so many things we take for granted, yet so many, Lord, we don't even have. This offering that we return to you, please use it to the growing of your kingdom and to helping those in need. We'll thank you again in the name of Jesus.
tell you that's one of my all-time favorite songs, and I've never heard anybody sing it.
I haven't had it, she's been practicing.
All right, that blessed my heart today. And it's,
It was supposed to be a surprise.
well, boy, it was, and let me tell you, and that's why I've asked Dane for a minute, it means even more today than it would a few weeks ago, and Dana doesn't know this, but very few of you were in this church when Clarence Parker was pastor. But he was a dear friend of mine. I love that man like my own brother, and I was a teenager at that time, and I would spend a lot of time with him. We had an old Gestetler copy machine, and we actually ran off a little newspaper for the kids every week. A lot of us kids, I think, now Mike Brown and Joe Allen, and there's so many others. We would go to their house at night over here, and a lot of times, he had 2 children. We'd spend till midnight, 1 o'clock talking about things. And he started working on his master's degree. And he would take me during the summer when school was out. I would ride up there with him and roll across the OU College campus while he was taking classes. I can't tell you how he affected so many of us in this church, but he certainly was one of the most influential people in my life. And I think of him often. Last time I saw him was at a funeral we did in one of his relatives came down. Brother Parker was also, when I was in the legislature, he would visit with me from time to time. He was one of those who would go to the McAllister prison when someone was due to be executed. And he would have prayer with their family, and he would stay there through the ordeal to try and, I visited, he was doing that up until his 80s. He just couldn't get there. I could just go on and on about this man because he's such a rare human. And his wife, Peggy, one arm was, Mary Ellen, I wish she was here today, she would know about it. One arm was paralyzed, and yet she could play piano. Unbelievable. And they were just so faithful, that 2 children. But anyway, the last couple of months, he's really been on my mind so much. And a couple of times I tried to get information, couldn't get a number for him. And yesterday, Dana, we went in onto this site, and it was still processing. We didn't get any number. I just wanted to talk to him and tell him what an influence he had been on my life. This morning I got to Sunday, Oklahoma, and he passed away. And it just really bothered me this morning that I just didn't pursue this or even drive to him to see him. And I guess one thing I'm saying is, there's people who have influence on your life. Don't let it go. Don't let it go. Tell them. And I've talked to him before, but I really would just like to come and hug him and say, I don't know those teenage years if I've ever gotten through it. And so many with his wife and his kids. But every one of you has had somebody who's had a major influence on your life. And I've got a little form on my desk, and I'll look at it again this afternoon. But pretty well, in the end, just another vanished friend. We don't take the time to say anything. We're too busy actually doing nothing to take care of the real things that we ought to be in life. But somehow, and I will get hold of his wife, 50 years ago, a man came to this church, and he still has an influence today. And 50 years from now, the Lord has not come, somebody is going to step up behind this pulpit and talk about it. Maybe David, maybe Brother Patrick Smith, maybe not, but somebody will stand up here and say, I wish I would have told them what the influence that they had on my life. Don't wait like I did.
Amen. 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 Don't wait to say the things that you need to say. It's odd, not odd, but it is a wonderful, beautiful thing, I guess, oddly beautiful, how someone whom you've never met, I can almost tell you that I will know him when I see him in heaven. That's how much I've heard him talk about over my life and heard people talk about. You know, I still have kids, and Roger, one of them, we were all kids. I still have adults that come to me today and say, you know, your grandpa used to pick me up every Sunday in that old green van. Everybody knew about that old green van. I think the floor was rusted through. You could see the axle turning as you drove. But that was easier because we could just throw our cigarettes down through that hole. I remember. I just think though, and you know, a lady told me the other day. She said, I still have the Bible your grandpa gave me. A couple of years, well, it wasn't a couple of years ago now. I'm getting old, you guys, but when I first started, a couple of years after we had been here, I had so many people had already told me, your grandparents picked us up every Sunday. But this one person told me, I cannot place down who it was, that her and her two siblings, she said they not only picked them up on Sunday morning, but they'd come get them on Saturday night and take them and give them a bath. She said, we never had anybody who loved us like that. And I think of all the things that I've ever learned and all the things that really made a lasting impression. Lord, I talked a lot about this last night, about there is a difference in teaching a child a bit of knowledge and information and instilling value. And I said, there's something, I said, do you remember, just think about when you were growing up? No, you never had, no one, I remember my parents sitting down saying, now listen, remember, if you ever have the choice to kill someone, it's wrong. And then, like a test, whenever I wanted to kill someone, I thought, no, Mom and Dad said it's wrong. I have that. It doesn't work like that, does it? Something deep down inside of me says that this is right, this is wrong. That's instilled, that's there. It's hard to change. And I don't know exactly how it works. It's a very complex thing, I think, at times. But every bit of it, I think, is rooted in love. Love for the lack thereof. Everything that really ever shaped me and ever formed me, and it's part of my core values, was given to me and handed to me by somebody who lovingly, delicately laid that upon my soul. And like an impression or an indention, it's there. You remember when Jesus said they were trying to trap him, and they were trying to say, should we pay taxes to Caesar, or should we give our money, is it God's or Caesar, basically? God or Caesar or God? And he said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar, give unto God what is. But he says in that, he's making an illustration, he takes out a coin. I mean, he has to borrow, I love that he has to borrow. The one who created the universe, owns a cattle on 1,000 hills, has to borrow a coin. But he borrows this thing, and he's looking at it, he says, you see, he said, whose face is imprinted or impressed upon that coin? And they said, Caesar. And he said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's. Remember that? And that's where our verse cuts off. And you can tell that the guy was just trying to trap you, because anybody in their right mind, if they were really seeking answers, would have asked another question. Or Jesus would have responded in this way. Now, whose impression is upon you? Caesar is on the money. Who's impressed on your soul? And anything that looks like Jesus is going to be rooted in love. Anything good and pure and wonderful. And let people know how important they were to who you are today and to who the community is. I've been the worst in the world about not just picking up the phone. And Facebook gives you the feeling that you're connected when you're not really connected. But write a letter, make a phone call. I'm going to shave I'll shave 3 minutes off this sermon just for you, Dad. And no, I'm not going to go exactly what the direction I was going to. We're still going to go roughly the same outline, but this has been, like I said, a very busy week. A very, very busy week. There's so many different, not just church stuff, but things with the family and T-balls endings. So we have end-of-year parties, and we had pool party last night, stuff going on. And like I said at the opening, if the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. Do you know something I've noticed this week is over and over again? Three different families. It's the children that the devil's going after. The little ones, not teenagers, it's the little ones. And I can tell you, I've been fighting and clawing, and the more the devil tries to get at me, the more I get mad at him, and he knows that. But if he gets to my kids, just pray. He knows that gets to my heart. I would much rather anything happen to me, and I would much rather deal with him on my own than to know that he's after my children. But greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. And we've got to show our kids how much how important they are and how much God loves them. And we parents, grandparents, listen to me. We have got to pray. Pray, pray, pray. You heard your parents pray for that hedge of protection around you. Pray that for your children. Understand what it means. Know that God loves them. And don't just pray for your children. Pray with your children. You see, we're on this big old ship. It's kind of what a family is like, I guess. And there comes a time whenever you have to get off Mom and Dad's ship, and you have to board the SS Wife and Kids, or On Your Own, or Good Luck Pal, or See You in a Few Months. And so you exit, you disembark Mom and Dad's ship, and you board your own ship, and your ship doesn't look like Mom and Dad's ship. Oh, no, yours is new and shiny. There's the paint's not worn off of the hull. Hasn't had years of waves, salty waves beating against the side of it. There's no cracks in the wood grain. You look back at Mom and Dad's ship and you see the old sail where it was torn almost completely in two, but Mom managed to mend it back together. You see how worn and bent it is, but it held, didn't it? It held and it was sturdy. And it made it. And Mom and Dad try to tell you the waters are rough. They're rough, and it's gonna be hard. And you know, in all the weddings I've ever done, and last night too, I cannot possibly find words to tell young couples what it's gonna be like. Because it'll be unique to them, but the devil will certainly see to it that they have their share of hardship. But you can still see this old ship, and that old ship looks like it should have never made it. But you've got this new ship, this new family, and you can't possibly see how anything can go wrong. Your ship's not like Mom and Dad's ship. You've got GPS, you've got internet, you've got all this technology. They don't understand. No. I know Mom and Dad gets rough, but it's not going to be as bad as it was back in the olden days, as we call them, whenever they were coming in on covered wagons. But this one's new, and your family, there's not anything that could go wrong. Your paint's still shiny on the sides, and you still look good, and you feel good. The engine runs smooth. And then you look back, and then you get out on those waters. And the first storm comes. And you realize it doesn't matter what your ship looks like. Remember that old crack on Mom and Dad's ship? Remember the worn paint? Remember the tired captains? That's why that ship is the way it is now. I told somebody, I said, there's no need to wonder why my parents are the way they are. It's because of us. Life will wear you out. It'll beat you down. And you may come through it just feeling like you just barely made it some days. But God is always going to guide you and take care of you. And he takes this whole chapter in Acts 27 to tell us about a shipwreck. And it's not really from a spiritual standpoint. The book of Acts is basically an order of the beginning of the church. Luke wrote it down as kind of like he was an investigator, he was a doctor, a medical doctor, but he liked to investigate things. And he researched everything, and he wrote about the journeys of Paul and the beginnings of the early church. It's a wonderful history book, really. But there's an entire chapter where he just stops and tells us about this one shipwreck of Paul. And I've always wondered, why is that so important? It's just basically, it would almost seem like a hiccup in Paul's efforts to begin the church. He didn't want to go on this trip. And I started thinking about, God has put that there for a reason. You know, and I get so frustrated some weeks because you ever feel like it's constant interruptions? And you just, gosh, I wish that this phone would quit ringing. I wish that people would quit coming to the door so I could get some things done. I'm trying to do ministry here, and people won't leave me alone. And Jesus' life was a series of nothing but constant interruptions, ever. That was his life. He was on his way somewhere, and somebody would stop him. Every time. And you know what? He always had time for it. Because he knew he wasn't they weren't interrupting something. They were the something. And anyway, he takes this here, what looks like almost like an interruption in the journey, to not only teach Paul a lesson, but now he teaches us a lesson. And he says basically this, that you're going to have so many things in this life, and I wrote some of them down. I won't go through all of them this morning, and Tanner, if you want to run through them, you can, but for the first several, just he goes through several things that he says will sink your ship. There are several things that will sink you out here. And you're sailing through life, there's going to be things that try to take you down. And Acts 27, verse 9 says, before they had rushed down from the land, they said, look, we need to do something. Let me go back. Let me read the whole story to do that. And then we'll go through these verse 5. But he says there's some things that are going to try to sink your ship. Let me read this to you. Acts 27. When it was decided that we would sail for Italy, Paul and the other prisoners came over and handed Paul over to the centurion named Julius, who belonged to the imperial regiment. We boarded a ship from Adratinium, anybody want to try that? About to sail for ports along the coast of the province of Asia. And we put out to sea. Aristarchus and a Macedonian from Thessalonica was with us. The next day we landed at Sidon, and Julius, in kindness to Paul, allowed him to go to his friends, and so they could provide for some of his needs. And anyway, they get up and they decide that there's a storm coming. And Paul says, we don't need to go. He says, it's going to get bad. We need to stay close to the shore. It doesn't look bad now, but I can tell you it's coming. We need to stay. But they decided to go anyway. And it says, when a gentle south wind began to blow, they saw the opportunity, so they weighed anchor and sailed along the shore of Crete. Before very long, a wind of hurricane force, called the northeaster, swept down from the island. And the ship was caught by the storm and could not head to the wind, so they gave way to it and were driven along. As we passed to the lee of a small in the island called Cauda, we were hardly able to make the lifeboat secure. So the men hoisted it aboard. Then they passed ropes under the ship itself to hold it together. But because they were afraid, they would run around on the sandbars of the Syrtis. They lowered the sea anchor and let the ship be driven along. We took such a violent battering to the storm that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. On the third day they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. After they had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said, men, you should have taken my advice. Told you so. And he says, you should have taken my advice and not sailed to Crete. Then you would have spared yourself this damage and this loss. But now I urge you to keep your courage, because not one of you will be lost. Only the ship will be destroyed. Last night, an angel of God to whom I belong, and whom stood beside me, and said, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. So keep your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as He told me. Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island. On the 14th night, we were still being driven along, and then it goes in and describes this great shipwreck. And if we have time, I'll describe it to you. But it's just a massive. It destroys everything in it. But not one single person loses their life. That is an incredible historical story. And I love that I thought about it when I originally started looking at preaching this chapter. I was going to talk about it from the standpoint of, can you believe that Paul being somebody that God loves so much that He'd even save the people that are with you because He loves you that much. Hey, because of the faithfulness of Paul, the rest of you guys, you're not going to die. That's some pretty incredible faith in God.
How many people were converted to Christianity because of that?
Right? That opened up the entire, I guess, the Asian province. I mean, you're talking about, it is unbelievable sometimes when guys are talking about, take a look at the map of the early church, how on earth it happened. Only God could have done it. But it was Paul. When Paul would go into a city and he would set up shop for months on end, and he'd plant a church, and that church would just start to grow. And he'd go to this town, and he'd go to these. It was getting so bad in Ephesus, the church was growing so big that the people that were selling little figurines, the other gods, were getting mad because their sales were going down. And our general superintendent said that's in a town of 400,000 people. They noticed because of the number of people that were flocking to Christianity that it was hurting their sales, and they were mad about it. And that's how quickly and rapidly this was growing. And so the devil knows that he needs to try to get Paul worked up. He needs to try to get him he's got to stop this somehow. But what the devil uses to hurt, and the devil uses to tempt, God is using to test, and God is using to shape. And so this, what could have been a tragedy, winds up being one of the greatest testimonies that the world's ever known. And it says but anyway, he spends this first part of this chapter basically telling you several things that will sink your ship. And he says, first, this compulsion. And that's where we just don't know what we need to do. We just need to be doing something. This is what, to me, defines our generation. We just kind of show up and say, listen, we don't know how it should be done. We just know it shouldn't be done the way you're doing it. And we have no idea what's going on. We just need to be doing something, even if it's the wrong something. And I feel like that's kind of the way, and Paul says, that'll sink your ship. You don't need to be compulsive like the rest of the world. You need to take time and seek God's will. And he said another thing that will sink your ship is consulting with the wrong people. Asking advice from the wrong places. Having your fortune read, or having people that don't know the Lord try to give you some worldly advice. It's usually very self-centered. You do you. Whatever makes you happy. That's not good advice. If I did what made me happy, my kids would sleep outside every day. But no. Wake up. Wake up. So he said the consultation with the wrong people can sink your ship. Well, the big one I just almost don't even want to say it because this is convicting. Comfort. Comfort will sink life's ship pretty quick. You get comfortable with where you are and how you live and with the people that you're around, and suddenly you get comfortable enough that you don't need to depend on God. We don't need to worry about it. We're comfortable. No, and he says, you know what? The second you're comfortable where you are in your relationship with Jesus, that's the minute that you are in danger of your ship being sunk. Never be satisfied. You'd be satisfied in Christ, but never be satisfied with where you are in Him. Does that make sense? Constantly seek to know Him better, to know Him more, and to serve Him better. But he says, comfort will sink your ship. And so the devil always says, he'll say, go this way, and it'll be much easier. Just you don't have to do much of anything. If it causes you discipline or hardship, don't do that. No. God wouldn't want that for you. So many people in America make their decisions exactly like they do on Animal Planet. An animal eats when he wants to eat, wakes up when he wants to wake up, he cohabitates with who he wants to cohabitate, he reproduces with whom he wants to reproduce. That's just animal basic instinct living. And we talked about that Darwin always talked about survival of the fittest and how that human beings evolved because it's the survival and it's because of our natural instincts. I would probably argue it's been the suppression of our natural instincts that's allowed us to survive as long as we have. My natural instinct is to take care of me and no one else and to do what feels good and to satisfy myself. But what is right is to feed my children and to get up in the morning and make the bed and that sort of thing. It's not just an animal type of instinct living that's allowed us to be. And so he says, comfort. Comfort will sink your ship. He says another thing that'll sink your ship, consensus. There's a centurion that couldn't decide what to do. Well, should we sail? Should we not? I don't know what we should do. 272 hands go up. The majority vote is, let's go. Oh, man. You can't smoke in our church. Oh, man. Oh, man. Is this the longest y'all been this quiet? Pardon me. Okay. Let's bring this big plane for landing. So 272 hands go up and say, we ought to sail. It looks good. Oh, thank you. I thought it was a cigarette. I was like, well, wait, I have to wait till I Now, I'm joking about smoking in that church then, but I couldn't have made that cigarette joke when we woke. I'll just say that much. All right. But listen, folks. The majority of this ship said, we ought to sail. It's fine. Everything looks great. We calculated it. We mapped it out. We ought to do it. The majority, most always, not every time, but the majority is almost always wrong. You know, the average church, the majority is wrong. Majority of members don't do what we ought to do. The majority isn't always right. We assume that it is. We want it to be. We have a desire for it to be, but it's not. Sometimes it's right, but if you cannot simply say that it's not okay just to say, well, the majority says it's okay, so we ought to do it. That's called general consensus. That's not at all, and because there's no way you can ever know what the majority is doing in life. You can't possibly know. You always have this feeling, like I talked to somebody, when I knew it got ridiculous, I was talking to my pastor friend yesterday, and we were talking about this immigration thing, and he said that we have become more racist in who we let into this country. That we have become more racist towards people of darker color, skin color. We don't care much about European, that sort of thing. When in actuality, the number of white-skinned people has gone down, and the number of brown-skinned people has gone up considerably over the past 100 years. Considerably. But there's this feeling. So you can't ever trust the general consensus of what it is in life. So he says that'll sink your ship. If you go out there and you start listening to what people are saying, they're going to sink your ship pretty quick. The big one is circumstance. You'll be sailing along. You'll finally get that old sail mended. You'll get the hole patched up in the hole. You'll get everything finally to now. There's no storm in sight. And out of nowhere, a storm will whip up. And you're all of a sudden in the middle of a circumstance where you're inexperienced. You've never been here before. You can't call mom and dad on this one. This is yours. This is your ship. You got to fix this. And Paul said, if you just, and it says this moderate, I like that. A moderate south wind came up. And supposing they had attained their purpose, they weighed anchor, and we sailed along close to Crete, along the shore, close to the shore. So they're voting, everybody decides to go, and the wind blows up, but the weather is moderate. So the weather is still perfect, and it's just a wonderful time to sail. And they're just sailing along. What they did is they said, now, the circumstances are just right. I finally got it where I need to have it. Now, friends, the most deceiving of all, I've heard many say, and have said myself, you know it's God's will. They'll say something like this to this effect. You know it's God's will because He gave me the opportunity. Well, God gave it, so it has to be His will. They don't check with God first. They don't check the wind, whichever way it's blowing. They say, no, right now, it's fine. It must be what God wants. You know what? I found out that in my own life, sometimes Jesus looks a lot like Daddy. Sometimes God's will looks a lot like what Daddy really wants. Isn't that odd how that works? But that gentle south wind was about to turn extremely violent. And that's 5 ways it'll sink your ship. And I'm not going to preach these last points, but I'm just going to give them to you really quick. Because this life, you will have some storms. You will have some times in your life whenever the salt water is going to be beating against the sides of your life, and the devil is going to try to bring you down, and the storm is going to be whipped up, and you're going to be tossed back and forth, and there's going to be something that will reach down in you, and if your parents didn't say it to you, I'm going to say it to you now so you can remember this someday whenever that storm whips up. Grab your anchor. Get your anchor and throw it in. It's your only hope. It's your only hope. If you're ever going to make it through this, forget the sails, forget the sides, forget the paint, forget the radio. You just need to remember your anchor. Because if you can get that anchor on the bottom, and get close enough to the shore that you can let that anchor rest on the bottom, there's a chance you might be saved. But if you don't get that hold of that anchor, there is no hope. And if you will grab a hold of Jesus, it won't matter the circumstance. It won't matter what is going on around you. You will be anchored in Jesus. And the rest of the world can spin out of control. And the violent storms can whip up and the waves can get over your head. And you will be safe, anchored in Jesus. And he said, he guarded Paul. He guided Paul. He gladdened Paul. He made him joyful and happy. And a lot has comes and goes, but it goes through this. But Acts 23 says, on the night immediately following, this is just before, on the night immediately following, the Lord stood at his side and said, take courage, for you have solemnly witnessed to my cause in Jerusalem, so you must witness also in Rome. Jesus comes to Paul and says, Paul, you're going to Rome, and you'll be free. And this is one of my favorite verses. It is my all-time favorite verse in the book of Acts. Man, it'd be a hard competition in the New Testament, but this is a powerful little verse that you would miss if you didn't know. And thus we came to Rome. Acts 28:14. That's highlighted in my Bible. That is circled. I read it all the time. The Lord said, Paul, you're going to Rome. And then all this stuff happens. A world of sorrow and tragedy and loss. And thus, God did what He promised He would do. I don't know what storm you may be going through. You may not be going through one right now. But I know enough to know that if you're not in one now, you will be soon. And the devil would like you to know, or would like you to think, that there's no hope. Nobody's ever survived a storm like this. You'll be lucky to live through this. They're going to laugh you out of this town. And he will do everything to try to get you to sink that ship. But you've got your anchor. And that is the one thing that the storm can't get to. It can't touch it. So whenever it starts to get violent out there and the chaos is whipping up around you and you feel like there is no hope and everybody around you is saying, there's no hope, it's all lost, we're going down. You say, not me. I've anchored in Jesus. The storms of life may rage, but I've anchored in Jesus. I'll fear no wind or wave, for He speaks and the waves listen. at any moment in your life, whenever you feel like you can't possibly make it one more second, there's always hope in Jesus. So grab your anchor, because the storm is coming. And thus we came to run. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for an anchor in a crazy, chaotic world. I ask God that you would forgive me for getting caught up in the commotion and the chaos at times. And I know, Lord, that these conversations are important, and I know that they're not anything to take lightly, but I feel like more than anything, whether it's in Holdenville, Oklahoma, or the Metro, or New York City, I feel like what the world needs and what people need to hear is not anyone who says, you're wrong because. We need a voice in the world again that says, thus saith the Lord. We're not here to reason with anyone or argue with anyone or prove God to anyone. We are simply here to declare you and to witness for you what you've done in our lives and what you have said for us to do with ours. Father, I just ask that you would help us to remember who we are in you, and that we would always, always look to you. And when this world is looking for answers, may we not say the most reasonable thing to do is, but may we say, thus saith the Lord. And we will give you the glory and the honor. Dismiss us now in Christ's name. VBS meeting right now in 2 weeks. Virginia, is it 2 weeks from today?
Oh, okay.
Is it next Sunday? Next Sunday, guys. Be sure